hurricanes, coastal erosion and sea level rise, and toxic algae just completely inundating all of our waterways. Unfortunately, my representatives in Florida are only making the crisis worse and condemning my state to an uninhabitable future. That's why I worked so hard to elect President Biden and ensure that we had a Democratic House and Senate so that we could finally begin the work of transitioning off of fossil fuels and tackling the climate crisis that honestly should have begun over a decade ago. I'm here today because we simply cannot lose another decade. We can and must pass robust climate investments in the Build Back Better Act to fulfill President Biden's commitment of reducing our emissions by at least 50% by the end of the decade. I just want to be clear that even this commitment is the absolute bare minimum of what's needed to do our fair share as the United States and stave off the worst of the climate crisis to come. So just be grounded in that today. That's why we're all here. That's what we're fighting for. And I'm going to pass it over to Senator Ed Markey from Massachusetts, the Green New Deal maker himself, to kick us off for the program.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you all so much. Thanks to all of you for joining us today at this historic moment. Thanks to Sunrise, of course, and Evergreen, and the Hip Hop Caucus, and the Sierra Club, and Greenpeace, and the NRDC, and all of the young people who have led this revolution, that we pass legislation that matches the magnitude of the problem which our planet is confronted with. And we're going to be joined by my partners in the United States Senate, great champions, Ron Wyden, Chris Van Hollen, and Tina Smith. So we thank them. And again, we thank the young people for being the heart and the soul of our climate movement. You are leading the way for historic and transformational change in this reconciliation package, and I am grateful for all of your partnership. Right now, the United States Congress needs to pass two important infrastructure bills, but only one of those two bills is a climate bill. The two bills, the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the budget reconciliation package, would make historic investments in our country's physical and human infrastructure. They are the Joe Biden Build Back Better agenda, and our workers and families need both of them together. That is the deal, and that is the only deal that will work for our country. Right now, across the country, we see billions in damage, and the human toll that wildfires and massive hurricanes and catastrophic freezes and other climate-fueled emergencies are costing us. And with a robustly funded budget reconciliation package, we also see the millions of good-paying union jobs that can be created in solar and wind, in all-electric vehicles, and battery storage technologies, and clean energy technologies across all of our country. That is this historic turning point that we are at right now. And we see the global leadership that is possible if we pass this package before President Biden heads to the International Climate Conference in Glasgow next month. We must act in Congress before Joe Biden goes to meet with the rest of the world. President Biden must be able to put a deal on the table that reflects what we then expect from the rest of the world, so that we begin a downward trajectory in terms of the greenhouse gases that are going up into the atmosphere. And we see emissions reductions that are possible. We could reduce economy-wide greenhouse gas emissions in the United States 50% below 2005 levels by the year 2030. Achieve an 80% carbon-free electricity sources in the United States by the year 2030, and make half of new United States cars and trucks electric by 2030. And while we still have a long way to go to meet our goal of net zero emissions globally by 2050, Failure to act now will make this goal nearly impossible to achieve. So here's the deal. Climate cannot and will not be cut. No climate, no deal. Climate solutions must remain upfront and center in this reconciliation package. When Congress was negotiating infrastructure this summer, Senators Wyden and Smith and Van Hollen and I said very clearly, no climate, no deal. We stand fast to that pledge. This package must include a civilian climate corps to employ, train, and mobilize hundreds of thousands of people to fight the imminent threat of climate change, all while getting paid a fair wage and securing educational and healthcare benefits for all of those workers. This package must include my Clean Energy Accelerator with Senator Van Hollen to bring public and private financing for emissions-reducing projects directly into the communities that need them the most. Right. And we will continue to fight for a strong set of clean electricity policies that Senator Smith has championed, that jumpstart the clean energy revolution and deliver renewable, affordable electricity to Americans. And this package must include the tax breaks crafted by Senator Wyden for our clean energy technologies that create good-paying union jobs here in the United States. We can also take this opportunity to strike outdated, unnecessary, decades-old tax breaks for fossil fuels and make polluters pay. And let me be clear, natural gas is not clean energy and it is not climate action. It is possible to find middle ground in many areas of politics. I know because I have done it. But we cannot compromise on science. There isn't a middle ground between a livable and unlivable world. We cannot pass the bipartisan infrastructure bill without the reconciliation package. We cannot slash climate funding in this package. That would go back on the promise to voters, to young people, and to the American workers who don't want to be left behind as the world moves to fight the climate crisis. We need to pass a robustly funded, climate-focused reconciliation bill to address the most important issue confronting our world, the climate crisis. It is the environmental, economic, national security, and moral issue of our time. Right. And this is the time to act and to send a message to the rest of the world that we are back in business. Right. And Reverend, thank you for your great leadership on this issue, bringing that moral center to this issue. And thank you again to all of the young people who have led on this issue. And now I'd like to introduce tremendous young Sunrise activists whose words give me inspiration. We have the opportunity to reclaim the American dream and replace it with a dream fit for all and the 21st century, and that means environmental justice. Please welcome this great Sunrise leader, Nikayla Jefferson. Welcome, Nikayla.
Yes, Nikayla here from Sunrise. No climate, no deal. Because I am from the state of California, and I know in very intimate human terms all about the climate. There is oil spilled all over my beaches. The Dixie Fire, the largest in state history, it's burned an area almost the size of Rhode Island. And in that size, small towns that some of my friends have called home, but have had taken away and scorched to ash. The fire still burns on across empty rivers and streams and peaks that should be capped in snow. I am alive at the hottest time in human history, alive at the time the state recorded 132-degree heat, alive to swallow air thick in choking charcoal and to swim in an ocean unnaturally warm, sit by a shore where each year the waves reach higher and higher. I am alive at a time the water was once at my ankles, but it is now at my knees. No climate, no deal, because it will rise higher, to and over my neck. I'm alive at the time I will have to live through the loss of the land I was born, raised, and loved. But what makes me feel the climate crisis so urgent and devastating and existential is that I will have to live through the very human pain and the suffering of the people that I love. I think of my brother. He is 13 now, and most days when we talk about his 8th grade class drama or advice about how to get through stay at home with mom and dad, but some days it's about the future. And I hear in his small voice a deep and dark fear because he doesn't know much about the future, but he can draw a pattern through the time that he's lived, 13 years in the time of the climate crisis. And he knows that it will get worse. And when he talks about the future, he tells me he is afraid and struggles to see himself as happy and sometimes even alive in it. No climate, no deal, because a compromise on climate is a compromise on me and my family and my home. A compromise on climate is to trade life and land like plastic chips to feed a man's appetite for power and control his ego. Our lives are worth the full effort and expense of the government, because what else is this all for except to protect and preserve us? That the duty of all those sworn into these offices, if they do not pass a deal with full effort for climate, 45% emissions reduction by 2030, then they will have totally failed their one job. And this country should feel embarrassed and ashamed at the level of incompetence, corruption, and weakness that has taken over its elected officials. Joe Biden cannot go to COP26 to negotiate global climate cooperation when he cannot even cut a good deal for climate, pass his own agenda in his own party. If the Democratic Party passes a deal without full effort for climate, it will be evidence for what so many of us already feel, that our elected officials are so far removed from the reality of the climate crisis and they govern without thought to us and the value of human lives. No climate, no deal. And these programs, the CEPP, the CCC, it's just shorthand that signals the beginning of this country's promise to value life in the time of the climate crisis and commitment to fight for everything that it's worth. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Nikayla. Now I'm really glad to pass it to Senator Ron Wyden from Oregon, who is taking up Nikayla's fight and all of our fights in the halls of Congress and making sure that, the full effort on no climate, no deal is put into action.
Thank you. And let me just pick up on that wonderful presentation, because no climate, no deal means no compromising on the future of America's young people. And I'm going to talk a little bit about taxes. Taxes are normally about as interesting as sort of a prolonged root canal. But here,
Not to us, Ron. Not to us.
they're big stakes here, and I'm gonna be brief. For years and years, what's happened in these halls, the Congress just ladles out scores and scores of tax breaks, usually for the powerful fossil fuel crowd. No questions asked. Member of Congress shows up, they get their tax breaks. And so what we did this year, I'm the chairman of the Finance Committee, is we took those 44 tax breaks for energy and we threw them in the trash can. Okay? Gone. Dustbin of history. And we said we're going to do something different, which nobody has ever done in 100 years. We're going to say, in the future, we'll have one for clean energy, one for clean transportation, one for energy efficiency. And here's the tagline, folks. The more you reduce carbon emissions, the bigger your tax savings. Okay? Period. Full stop. So for the first time, we're on our way to a federal policy that actually gives us a chance to reduce power sector emissions 75% by 2030 and something that Sunrise has fought for years, net zero by 2035. And I so appreciate your leadership and the leadership of young people at home. I just had a town hall youth climate meeting. And young people are saying they're going to hold elected officials accountable, not just for kind of cliches and we think climate is serious, but for the real deal. And I would just hope that as part of No Climate, No Deal, and I've got colleagues, Senator Smith, Senator Van Hollen, Senator Markey, another shout out for Senator Markey, leading the Green New Deal, being there. After what happened in a 6-week period this summer, we saw Louisiana get battered. We saw folks on the east coast of the United States trying to get water out of their basements, people hanging on to light poles. In my part of the world, we had the bootleg fire, so powerful that it actually changed the weather. And what I believe is the theme of our grassroots juggernaut, because that's what Sunrise has really built, is we now need a legislative agenda with the good work being done by my colleagues that shows our climate ambition really meets the times. The times don't call for any little itty bitty thing here and a little bitty thing there. It calls for the kinds of bills we're talking about. This tax committee that I'm in charge of has never done anything like I described to you in more than 100 years. Never did anything close to what we're talking about in terms of protecting the environment. And so everybody in Sunrise and all the young people who have organized across the country are bringing it home, because political change rarely starts in Washington, D.C. and trickles down. It's almost always grassroots up. And we just want you to know you've got friends here who are going to be part of your grassroots movement from sea to shining sea. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Senator Wyden. Now glad to introduce Senator Tina Smith from Minnesota, who's really been such a champion for fighting for clean and renewable energy for our future generation.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you to my colleagues. Thank you to Wes at Evergreen Action, and to Michaela and Lauren at Sunrise and all the Sunrise leaders, and thank you also to Reverend Yearwood at Hip Hop Caucus. We are at a unique moment, a moment that we cannot waste. This summer in Minnesota, extreme drought covered much of my state. At the same time, we had historic fires in the Boundary Waters canoe area, which is practically nothing but water. And the amazing Gooseberry Falls that flows into beautiful Lake Superior slowed to a trickle. This is the impact of climate change just this summer in the state that I love so well. Minnesotans understand that addressing climate, taking strong action on climate, is a moral imperative. But we also understand that it is an economic imperative, and that by taking strong action, we can create more opportunity. We can create good union jobs. We can create more equity and more fairness in our country. We can create the innovation and the opportunity that is going to drive us to a leadership role, not just in Glasgow, but across this globe for the coming years. Now, when I was lieutenant governor, I remember so vividly a group of young climate activists coming to call on me. They were part of an organization called Will Steger Legacy, led and inspired by the incredible Arctic explorer Will Steger. They came into the impressive and grand governor's reception room, a room that was designed to impress, and I would also say to intimidate. And they sat around in a circle with me, and they shared with me their deep fear about what the world was going to look like when they grew older. At the end of that discussion, they looked at me and they posed a question to me. They said, "Tina, what are you going to do? You have power. What are you going to do with the power that you wield?" So I'm here to tell all of you today what we are going to do with our power. Not just me and my colleagues standing before you, but all of us, what we are going to do with our power. We are going to make sure that this Build Back Better plan, it is required to include strong climate legislation, legislation that gets us where we have to go to protect our globe. We need to hit the president's goals. We need to make sure that this plan includes progressive, practical policies like moving our utility sector, our power sector to clean power, 80% by 2030. We need to do the kind of work that my colleagues behind me are working on to have clean tax credits, clean energy tax credits, to have renewable energy efficiency plans. All of this we need to do. The Civilian Climate Corps, this is what we need to accomplish. My grandson, my second grandson, baby Hollen, was born almost exactly a week ago. And I want you all to know that I think of baby Hollen and all of the babies born right now, and I want to say that I want to make sure that they get to know what snow looks like in Minnesota. They know what it's like to see that snowfall. That is the pledge, that is the promise, that is why we stand before you today and say, no climate, no deal.
Thank you so much, Senator Smith. I'm now introducing Wes Gobar from Evergreen Action to share why he's in this fight as well.
Hey everyone, I'm Wes Gobar, Coalition's lead with Evergreen Action. Earlier this summer, when it seemed like bipartisan negotiations threatened our climate ambitions, dozens of members of Congress stood up to say no climate, no deal. And Senator Ed Markey was one of the first people to stand with us, and we're thankful to have Senator Smith, Senator Wyden, and Senator Van Hollen with us here today too. This is it. There's no Planet B, just like there's no second chance to deliver on Biden's climate agenda. It's time for the entire Democratic caucus to unify around bold climate investments. And that's why I'm here today. I'm here today to say that any deal that doesn't fully fund climate is a raw deal for our communities. I'm a Virginian. That's my community. And Virginia, like many other places across the country, is feeling the pain from the climate crisis. This isn't hypothetical. Hampton Roads is flooding all the time. Entire neighborhoods are underwater and are going to be uninhabitable. And so we need Biden to act now to stop this climate carnage. The climate crisis is here, though. It doesn't matter where you are in the US. Entire communities were scorched by wildfires and record heat waves this year. In fact, 1 in 3 Americans experienced a climate disaster this summer alone. So you or someone you know has experienced something from the climate crisis. And for Black communities especially, for Black communities especially, these investments are life and death. The flooding in Virginia is already driving people out of their neighborhoods, pricing them out of their homes. And we are sick and tired of, from Hurricane Katrina to Hurricane Ida, of the same communities over and over again being left behind after climate disasters. We need a clean electricity performance program and clean energy tax credits and so much more in order to put the US on a path to cut our pollution in half by 2030. These are investments in jobs and justice that will finally put Black and brown and poor communities at the heart of a thriving clean energy economy, and not just on the front lines of the climate crisis. This bill is the climate agenda that Biden ran and won on. This bill is the climate agenda that has unified the entire Democratic caucus, moderates and progressive alike. This bill is the bill that the climate agenda that the public overwhelmingly wants. And so now we just need to summon the public will to get it across the finish line. The Build Back Better Act is our best chance in more than a decade to save off the worst of the climate crisis and build an equitable clean energy future.
That's right.
When Biden faces world leaders at Glasgow at COP26 next month, they won't ask him whether he built roads and bridges with Republican votes. You know what they will ask him? Whether he met his climate commitments. And so if Biden wants to establish US leadership on climate, he needs the Congress to pass the Build Back Better Act with a bold clean electricity performance program. And when Biden gets home, he'll have to answer to communities like mine in Virginia too. So let's make sure he can tell them he passed a damn good bill. No climate, no deal.
Thank you, Wes. Okay, now we have Senator Chris Van Hollen from Maryland, who's been both fighting to make sure we propel ourselves into a clean energy future and also making sure in the process that we're holding polluters accountable, making sure they're paying for the damage they've done, as we move forward.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you. Look, we're all here with a clear message, which is any Build Back Better legislation that passes the House and the Senate has to include President Biden's climate agenda and the initiatives that he put forward and are very popular with the people across this country. Put simply, no climate, no deal. And I want to thank the Sunrise Movement. I want to thank Evergreen Action, Chesapeake Climate Action, Reverend Yearwood, and the Hip Hop Caucus. To all of you who are gathered here, this is not a time for incrementalism. This is not our schedule. This is the schedule being given to us by Mother Nature, and we see every day the accelerating harm of climate change. We see rising death tolls. We see rising healthcare tolls. We see rising destruction. It's here, it's now, it's accelerating. And when Mother Earth is screaming because it's more intense and frequent hurricanes, whether it's droughts that are hurting farmers here and around the world, whether it's rising sea levels that are impacting all the coastal communities, and yes, hitting communities of color especially hard. Just come down to Annapolis, though, where you've got the U.S. Naval Academy. They'll tell you, or our military will tell you, about the costs that we're experiencing right now from flooding and sea level rise. So the moment is here, the moment is now, and we have to respond. And it's not a moment where you can just say, we're going to do one piece of this and not another important piece. Because we have targets that are given to us by the scientific community. And we have to reach those goals. We have to reach the goals of 52% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2030. We need to get to net zero by 2050. And if you're going to do that, there's certain policies that have to be enacted. And I want to thank all my colleagues who are here, who are being such an important part of that. Senator Wyden, Markey, Smith, and others. We've got to get this done. And in addition to warning about the costs, which are clear to all of us who can see what's happening, we also have to talk about the opportunities. Because yes, there's the cost of inaction, but there are huge opportunities from action. By going to a clean energy standard, by moving everybody in that direction, we're going to put millions of Americans to work in good paying jobs. With the Civilian Climate Corps, we're going to put a whole new generation to work helping to make sure that we save this country and save the planet. Senator Markey and I have been for years working on a national climate bank to generate much more investment and have a big multiplier effect in clean energy. We need to enact all of these measures, including the incentives to move in super fast time to meet those goals that Mother Nature is dictating to us. And so when we are looking at this piece of legislation, we have to measure it and its success against the reality that we're all facing. And this is not a moment where there's time to wait, because we all know that if this moment passes and we don't do what needs to be done, it will be too late for the next generation and for everyone on the planet. So I want to thank my colleagues. This is a moment of truth, and we're gathered here in solidarity to say no climate, no deal.
Thank you again, Senator. And we'll have Reverend Yearwood, President of the Hip Hop Caucus, to close us out today, and then we'll turn it over to the press for a Q&A. Thank you.
Reverend.
Beautiful.
It is an honor to be here with these amazing, courageous senators who understand the time that we are in. It's equally amazing to be with my brothers, my sisters, my non-binary cousins, who are also here from different groups, from Evergreen and Sunrise and Hip Hop Caucus, here as well. I'm always excited to be here. My first station after I left officer training school with the Air Force was to be at Andrews Air Force Base and Bowling Air Force Base. My job as a chaplain in the Air Force was to be at Arlington Cemetery. It was an amazing position and very honoring. It seems weird because you're at a cemetery, but if you know Arlington, obviously, you can. It's amazing to see and to be in that position. So I don't want to speak necessarily the need for what young people, they spoke very well for themselves, or from those who deal with policy, and Wes did an amazing job at that, or even from the policy standpoint. The senators did good at that. I want to speak for the ancestors. And I'm not talking about some old ancestors. I'm talking about ancestors who were made this year in 2021. I want to talk about those who were burned alive in the wildfire in California. I want to talk about those in my home state of Louisiana who faced Hurricane Katrina 16 years ago and literally faced Hurricane Ida to the exact same day on August 20th of this year, and are still rebuilding their home. I want to speak to those who are dealing with energy poverty in Texas, who can't afford to pay their electricity bill. I want to speak to those in Delaware and in Washington State and in Minnesota, those who are hoping that we can have some sense to transition from fossil fuels to clean energy. I want to speak to America right now, because I pledged my life to America when I swore an oath to give my life to this country. I want to speak to both Democrats and Republicans that we are in a climate crisis right now. If you did not understand that, it doesn't matter who you are, black, white, brown, red, male, female, straight, gay, theist, atheist, it does not matter. If you are an American, you are dealing with the climate crisis right now. We are suffering right now with wildfires and droughts and hurricanes and things that are unspeakable. If I need to make it plain, trigger warning right now. There are children in Texas who froze to death this year. Trigger warning right now. There are babies who drowned, who literally were drowned to death in New Jersey this year. Not some far-off crisis, not some far-off warning. Right now, babies in America already struggling with the COVID crisis, drowning in this country, hoping and praying that we as Americans can do the right thing. That is where we are right now. So we're at a moment right now where we're going to send our president, not the Democrat president, not the Republican president, but our president on the world stage in 3 weeks to speak for us, to stand there for us, to represent us, and say that this country understands the crisis because we have paid with it with our blood and our souls, and this country stands there ready to do all it can do to build back better right now. That is this moment. It is not a game. This is not a game. And if you think it's a game, then put forth your loved one to face the unspeakable death of drowning. If it's a game and it's too much money, put forth your loved one to say their last prayers as the fires took down their houses in California. It was a game, and it's about money. Then put forth your loved one. Come on, don't wait. Don't hold up. Wait and see him. Put forth your loved one on the altar of the sacrifice of climate crisis. And seeing no one, seeing absolutely no one, put their loved one on the altar of sacrifice of the climate crisis, then I know you join me in simply saying, no climate, no deal. No climate, no deal. No climate, no deal. We as Americans do better. We go forward. We come together. We've been through a lot. We're still going through a lot. But this we must unify to save what we got to save for the next generation. May God be with us. May God give us courage. May God bring us together at this critical moment right now. Thank you.
Oh my God. Incredible. 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 Fabulous. Fabulous. So, questions? Yes, sir. Who are you, please?
Nick Sobchak with E&E News. Thank you for doing this. When you say no climate, no deal, are there any policies that you absolutely must have in order to vote for the bill? And are there any concessions that you might be willing to make given some of the things that Senator Manchin has articulated about wanting to include carbon capture and his concerns with the clean electricity payment?
Again, we're here advocating for everything that is in the bill. We are here to say that we know that unless we do everything, that we can't solve this problem. And we're willing to listen to Senator Manchin to try to deal with his concerns, but ultimately, all of those programs that we talked about here today, we want to have in the final reconciliation bill.
The only other point on that I mentioned is we're also prepared to come up with fair ways to pay for it. For example, we have ready to go a billionaire's income tax. And let's face it, such a powerful presentation. A big part of no climate, no deal is fairness. And if firefighters and nurses pay taxes with every single paycheck, we don't think it's right for billionaires to essentially have a way to pay no income taxes for years and years on end. So Senator Markey made it clear what our agenda is. I also want everybody who's following this to know we're going to have a fair way to pay for the new priorities that are part of No Climate, No Deal.
Yes. Yes, sir?
Yeah, Joseph Warren, CQ, roll call. Senator Manchin isn't just worried about the top line, though. He has specific things in there. He mentioned also wanting to preserve those tax breaks for oil and gas companies that you guys referenced. If you guys are 180 degrees and saying no compromise, I guess where's this go, and what happens if the end result is no deal?
Okay, well, Senator Wyden,
Well,
job bill on the tax breaks.
First of all, Senator Manchin, even in some of these documents, has emphasized what's called technology neutrality. That's what we're doing with our agenda. What we're saying is, if you can reduce carbon emissions, you get the savings. So it is a tech neutral, no mandates, essentially free market approach, because we believe that the American people, if the tax code gives a fair deal, leveled so it's fair, we believe people are going to say this is the future. We'll be talking to Senator Manchin, but make no mistake about it. The days of business as usual, starting with the legislation we're talking about, and the fact that the Finance Committee, my colleagues, showed real guts in taking on a lot of those big lobbies that liked the status quo and said, nope, we're going to do something completely different. That's where we want to go. That's what No Climate, No Deal's about.
Yes, ma'am.
Kelly with Fox. Just to circle back on that, though, Senator Manchin, Senator Sinema, some other moderate Democrats have had a lot of face time in the Oval Office Caucus with the President of the United States to make sure their demands are heard. Do you feel like you've had enough face time to make sure your demands are heard? Is the President doing enough to listen to your message and hear your side of the perspective on all of this?
Well, just understand, we're defending the President's plan. That's what we're doing. And we talk to the White House every single day. We have the President's back. We're advocating for the strongest possible climate provisions, and that's what our coalition is all about, to see that it is not eroded.
I would just add that we heard this week the President reiterate and reinforce his commitment to strong climate policy in the Build Back Better Act. So I hear that, and I hear that every day, not only on television, but also behind the scenes in the conversations that I'm having. And I also want to reiterate that this is what America voted for. What we are talking about here are the core values that were laid out when President Biden was running for president, when I was running for re-election in Minnesota for the United States Senate. So we have to remember that what we are talking about is broadly supported within our caucus by the President and the Vice President and by the American people, and it is our job, all of our job, to deliver that promise in the Build Back Better bill.
Yeah, the only thing I want to add to that is that the Build Back Better agenda is the President's agenda. So our message to him has been, we've got your back. And we don't sense any retreat by the President from meeting those objectives. And look, we're open to a combination of policies that achieve the goals that the science tells us we have to meet, right? We want a combination of policies that will achieve the goal that the President has set, that scientists have set, of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, right, by 52% by 2030 and getting to net zero by 2050. So when we look at the policies, we've got to find a way to get there and do it in a fair manner, as Ron Wyden has said. And I know a bunch of us, and thank you, Reverend Yearwood, for your work on this, have proposed another way for the consideration of our colleagues to pay for much of this in a fair manner, which is to ask the biggest polluters to help pick up the bill to pay for the mess that they created. It's a polluter pays climate fund, and it would essentially assess the top 25 to 30 biggest polluters a fee, just like we have a super fund to address hazardous waste. And that is another idea that we put on the table. I've talked to Senator Manchin about it. He has not rejected it. We're not there yet. I know it's one of the things that's being looked at, but I guess what we're saying is the goal, we know what we have to hit, and the President is working to get there, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that happens. That has to be part of the bill.
Apropos of the White House, I sat, yeah, sure. And I certainly agree with all the points my colleagues have made. Apropos of the White House, I sat a few feet from the President in the Oval Office about a week or so ago. I made exactly the points that I'm talking about here. So there aren't any atomic secrets. It's not as if nobody, knows about it. President made it completely clear that he's completely supportive. And certainly Glasgow gives this urgency.
Melina with NTD News. So I just had a question about, Melina with NTD News.
Okay, good.
I had a question about energy independence. I know some people bring up the issue of relying on foreign nations like Russia and China for some of the rare earth minerals and the solar panels because they dominate that industry. Is there anything in the legislation or anything that you guys are working on to help make sure America can produce these independently on our own and not rely on foreign countries?
Well, I will say that we have been advocating for manufacturing tax breaks for the United States. And Senator Wyden has been great enough to build them into the legislation for solar, for wind, for the manufacturing here in the United States, and he's put them in, and it's going to be a revolutionary. And moreover, we have to have, though, the strong fuel economy standards. We have to be backing the oil out of our system. We're importing oil right now from the Middle East. We're importing oil right now from Russia. So if we don't dramatically reduce our dependence upon fossil fuels, we're going to continue to be dependent upon those other parts of the world, which then draw us into national security threats. So that's what this is all about, just reducing that dependence upon imported fuels. So let me just keep going here. Yes, sir. We'll take, we have one more question. Yes, sir.
Yes. Hi, I'm Brian Metzger with Business Insider, and I wanted to ask, since we're here with outside activists today, about all of your sense of the role of outside activism in these negotiations. We've seen protesters confronting Senator Manchin at his House vote, protesters following Senator Sinema into a bathroom. I'm wondering, just kind of generally, do you think that what role do you believe outside activism has to play in these upcoming fights over the Build Back Better agenda?
Well, that's the question that people ask me about why I introduced the Green New Deal with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez 2.5 years ago. And the reason is this, it's very simple. In 2009, Henry Waxman and I were able to pass a bill in the House of Representatives to reduce greenhouse gases by 80% by the year 2050. And we got it passed in the House. But the fossil fuel industry was able to kill it in the Senate. What I realized was we were missing a movement. We were missing this grassroots activism, which we're seeing here today, that focuses on emissions and jobs and justice every single day. And that is what has injected it. That is what has injected itself inside the political system. It's represented here today with this great diversity, and it is changing the way in which we discuss these issues. And it's important in order to hear those voices every single day. Thank you all so much for being here. And if you have any other questions, the members will be glad to hear.
I have a case in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. I've been in court for 6 years, sir, on a property matter. It's securities fraud.